Hey, Jonathan, Aussie boy, you're back home.
Hey,
What are you up to?
I am. Yeah, g'day, Torsten. It's good to be joining you today. It's a bit of a cheat because, I do assist with the production of this podcast, that climate copy, but it's this week we're on the road. So this week we're all the way down in Australia, in Melbourne,
Yeah,
for All Energy 2024. And it's actually the first time I'm back in Australia for this show since 2019 because COVID intervened and we were kind of locked out, so I wasn't able to touch base with the market for a few years.
yeah, excellent. Yeah, so thanks for joining.
I believe I might be kind of contractually obliged, but in any case, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So, Aussie land, Australia has been a leader in the
Mm.
application of solar, particularly residential rooftop. Um, what's the current situation? What's the new trends? What can you see at the show?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the show kicks off tomorrow, so you might see some people in the background
Okay,
in high visibility vests. So they're kind of
just
wearing those for safety reasons while they're setting their booths up and getting everything sorted.
yeah,
But from the market that we're seeing, the data that we're seeing from the market thus far, it's not an outstanding year for residential rooftop installations in Australia, but it's a pretty solid year. So
yeah,
the first 6 months of the year, it was something like 1.3 gigawatt of install. So it's probably going to the year for residential solar will be something like 2.78, maybe 9, maybe 3 gigawatt at the best. And for a country of 26 million people, that's not bad going for the residential market segment. So it's not an outstanding year ahead, but it's looking like a pretty solid year. What is interesting is that the attachment rate of residential batteries is increasing in Australia. So that's looking good, but it's well below a country like Germany, right? Where you
yeah,
guys are seeing something like 70, 80% residential battery attachment rate. So that means when a battery is installed alongside a rooftop solar system, while in Australia it's just ticking up over 20%. So it's well below where it should be for the country to meet its renewable energy goals, but it is slowly increasing.
yeah, yeah. Do you know anything about the drivers for the different application rate of battery in the residential area? It's just not too
That's
well known at this point, or are there other blockers?
Yeah, it would be yeah, it would be self-consumption. Right? So just maximizing self-consumption. There is a pretty big delta in Australia between what you pay as a residential electricity consumer
Mm,
and what you can produce rooftop solar at, right? So
yeah,
rooftop solar, I don't know what the cost per watt is, but it's going to be around 10 cents a watt or something like that. And the electricity you buy from the grid is 25% plus. It differs from state to state and who the retailer is. But
yeah,
there is a big delta. And those feed-in tariffs for the solar that you push back into the grid are really quite low in Australia. You're talking like 9 down to 6, maybe even 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So you're
yeah,
getting very, very little for the rooftop solar electricity that you're pushing back into the grid. So, that delta is the key for residential battery attachment rates. But a difference in Australia to somewhere like Germany is that there's just not the federal subsidies. There's very few subsidies, a few state-based subsidies for residential batteries, but it's really far from a federal program, and it's all a bit of a at its early stages compared to Germany.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
In contrast, Australia was one of the first countries to apply large-scale batteries. And there was one big installation promised by Elon Musk, the big battery in South Australia. How's that going, and what are the trends in the, let's say, utility battery market?
Yeah, well, that's a really remarkable one, and you're exactly right. It was that Hornsdale Power Reserve that was developed by the French IPP Neoen developer in IPP. So that was a few years ago, and yeah, as you said, it was a bet between the South Australian Premier and Elon Musk, like over Twitter or something like that, Elon said, I can have 100 megawatt battery installed in 100 days, or you can get it free or something, a classic piece of showmanship from Musk. But they delivered, and it was one of the first big kind of 100 megawatt batteries in the world. And it really was a wonderful proof of concept for what large scale batteries can do in terms of stabilizing the grid, because South Australia is a pretty lightly connected electricity network to the rest of Australia, or to that East Coast grid. And they have very high levels of renewable energy penetration. They're setting records almost every other day for levels of penetration. And they also have not that much synchronous capacity as well. So not that much thermal generation, or these spinning masses, which we know are super important for stabilizing the grid. So that Hornsdale Power Reserve was absolutely crucial for proving that batteries were really able to play in these kind of ancillary markets and provide this frequency services that the grid needs. And now we're seeing a lot of batteries being installed in Australia. Rystad reported that in the first 9 months of this year, 2024, that 4 gigawatts of batteries commenced construction, right? So at the start of the year, there were only about 1.7 gigawatts of batteries actually installed. Just this year alone, in the first 9 months, 4 gigawatts commenced construction. And Bloomberg NEF, they expect something like 18.5 to 19 gigawatts of large-scale battery storage to be installed through to 2035 in Australia, which again, for a country of 26 million people, is pretty good going.
Yeah, amazing. Australia going for the sun. Makes sense. There's another big thing in Australia which is in the Northern Territory, and plan is to supply lots of solar and hydrogen for the Northern Territory, but also to Singapore through a DC cable. Are there any news on that?
Yeah, that's the Sun Cable project, right?
Yeah.
So these are these huge, they're talking about gigawatts of solar, and then just an absolutely monumental cable. I think Andrew Blakers has some pretty strong opinions about that project, and I'll defer to him. He's an expert and the guest on the podcast this week. But I would say that some of these Northern Australian projects are interesting. I would say not so much for their ability to export power, not for exporting green hydrogen, but they're interesting for things like being able to, for Australia to develop a manufacturing industry based on cheap electricity that you can produce in these areas where there's very good wind resources, there's very good solar, and there's also things like iron ore. So the processing of iron into green iron, maybe a precursor for green steel production. I think that looks really encouraging, and we had a guest, Martin Green from the UNSW, who was saying something similar is looking promising for Australia in the future.
Yeah. So many exciting things happening. All the best for the show. Looking forward to hearing more from you after the show. And enjoy the stay in your home country, Jonathan. Thanks.
Yeah, I will very much. Thank you very much, Torsten. Good to touch base.
Yeah. Bye-bye.